First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Mike here with another episode of Creative Risk. I'm really excited for today. This is a solo episode with me and an old friend of mine, Ruggero Vittorini. I used to work back in the day when I was waiting tables. Ruggero was one of the head chefs at the restaurant I worked at, and he was always such an interesting dude. And looked up to him. Thought his aesthetic was on point. Nice guy, cool guy, phenomenal chef. And I grew close to him and his wife Martina, who also worked there. And they're just really good people. Really chill people, creative people. And so this, I'll talk about this in the episode, but this really all stemmed from something I saw Ruggero post on LinkedIn. And that's what sort of spawned this whole conversation. So before we get into it, I'm just going to read Ruggero's bio. Ruggero Vittorini is a multidisciplinary artist, habitual creator, and the founder of Inward Studio, a brand transformation agency that helps businesses evolve into fully realized brands. His creative journey has spanned a wide range of mediums, including music, painting, graphic design, film and TV production, and even the culinary arts. If it involves creativity, chances are he has explored it. At Inward Studio, he applies that same breadth of experience to branding, blending strategy, design, At Inward Studio, he applies that same breadth of experience to branding, blending strategy, design, and user experience to create brands that are not only visually At Inward Studio, he applies that same breadth of experience to branding, blending strategy, design, and user experience to create brands that are not only visually striking, but deeply intentional. He believes that creativity isn't just about making things, it's about solving problems, shaping experiences, and telling compelling stories. Beyond his work in branding, he is fascinated by the intersection of art and technology, particularly in AI's role in the creative process. Rather than seeing AI as a threat, he views it as a tool that, like every major creative innovation before it, has the potential to amplify human creativity rather than replace it. Just want to do one quick shout out here. Ruggero is also a phenomenal visual artist. It's funny, he is one of the few artists whose work I have seen that I'm like, that is like made for me. This is like my whole fucking aesthetic. So to see his artwork, you can go to his, it'll be in the link description. Go to his Instagram page, Ruggero Vittorini, or his alias, the Space Tomato, where he has a lot of cool artwork up there. Regardless, enjoy this interview with Ruggero Vittorini. It's been a while since we saw each other. I think the last time we saw each other was in Miami. When you were in
That's
Miami.
right. Yeah, you came through. That's right. Yeah, I was going through some changes.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of a round of like a journey for sure. And into the darkness, into the dark abyss of creativity.
Well, I'm curious about that.
Of a creative journey.
Because I remember that. I remember because you hated Miami. Like you kind of hated it.
I didn't hate Miami. Yeah. I didn't hate Miami. No. Miami, I still think of Miami as like the place with the best quality of life in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, Miami Beach. I think it's great. It's a walk away from the beach. It's great. Well, I was not digging working in restaurants 14 hours a day.
Right.
Specifically,
And this is kind of what I want to, the first question I do have, because you have a very complex journey and an interesting sort of creative journey. So I do just kind of want to start at the beginning and kind of get to that moment where last time I saw you. But tell me about your journey, So how did you come to art and where you are today?
Okay, so I've always been in the arts. I think that was never really an option for me. I just kind of was born into it in a sense. I always thought of that was like the natural thing. I mean, my father's a musician.
Right.
My grandfather was a painter. My aunt's like a professionally like a sculptor. My great grandfather was a writer. As far as back as it goes in generations, we're artists, and so for me that was kind of like the natural flow of things. I was always interested in music. I thought I wanted to be a film director when I was very young, and I was like shooting little movies, and this was like pre-teen, and then in my teenager phase, I was like editing skate videos, and then I started making music, and then I started studying music, and that took me all the way through college, and then not that I finished college, but I did some college, but at that point I already had a bit of a music career. I was on radio, so I was doing shows, and so that
rapping, right? You were rapping.
I was rapping, and then I was making beats, and I had a little bit going on when I lived in Tampa,
right?
And then when I moved to New York City, I was looking for jobs, and I think like many creatives. Looking for a job as a graphic designer or as a sound engineer. I was kind of resetting my whole, we call it career. I was kind of resetting and trying to look for new horizons there. But the reality is I needed to pay the bills. And so I started working in a restaurant as a server, which I really sucked at. So I was about to get fired as a server when I expressed my interest in the kitchen, because I always cooked, and I saw that as a creative thing.
Yeah.
And so, but really I just needed to pay my bills, man, and I just wanted like a steady income, and I just wanted to go from there. So I was still making beats, and, that never stopped anyways. But, so that kind of saved my ass, because I got into the kitchen, and I had to tell obviously the general manager that I wanted to make this transition. General manager was like, "Look, you probably wouldn't have lasted another week as a server, so good thing you good thing you want to make that
transition, right?"
It just so happened that the chef was looking for somebody with not a lot of experience to kind of get in there and start prepping and doing some things, and from there that kind of took me away, and it evolved into a career, basically another career in the culinary arts, which is another creative field, definitely. And I got into 100%. It because it was very creative. I knew that I always wanted to do my own thing, whether it was like open my own business or.
Well, I remember you were talking about for a while. I love that idea about opening like a oh my God, what was it? It was like a skate shop that was a deli or something like that. Like,
did I say that? I forgot. I know.
No. Like you were talking about, it was like a sandwich shop, but it was like a skate shop or something like that. That was also you could get like mortadella and shit.
Man, it sounds like something we would have had problems with the sanitation. What do you call it?
Oh, exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
First check, we would have got closed.
Exactly.
But yeah, so. That took that evolved into a culinary career. Obviously I got into it because it was a creative thing, but years down the road, I even opened up in partnership. I opened up a pizzeria in Brooklyn, and then exited that partnership. In fact, that was kind of skateboard themed.
There you go.
That was a little bit skate themed. And then moved to Miami Beach, and then ended up working still in restaurants and fine dining, so kind of like elevated myself as a chef,
right?
And then at some point, I don't know, it's like lightning struck, and I realized that I still wanted to be my own boss, and I wanted to have some kind of business of my own, but it really struck me that the restaurant wasn't what I wanted to do. I had worked for the corporate, big corporate chef who didn't have much wiggle room creatively because the big suits wanted to have some things on the menu that he didn't want.
Right, exactly.
I worked for the mom and pops that was very successful, but it was like you're chained to the restaurant 14 hours a day. So I realized that I didn't want any of those things across that whole spectrum, and so I decided to take the leap of faith of figuring out what my true creative path was going to be. And it wasn't really clear. I thought I wanted to open a studio, but, obviously studios were kind of already fading away as a thing because, everybody's got a home studio.
Right.
So I didn't know. I knew that graphic design was something that I could at least bring some bread home with by freelancing. So I started doing that. Obviously, all my chef friends thought I was totally going nuts, which probably I did. Maybe I was going a little nuts.
Well,
I was a little burned out.
It's funny. Well, it's not to, because I want to continue with this, but what's so fascinating to me about you specifically, we talk about sort of like, I believe sort of in macro cycles in the sense of like historical cycles. And we talk about this thing called the death of specialization, which is like artistic specialization in terms of like, I am an artist, I am a painter, I am a filmmaker, I am a da-da-da. And it's like sort of like post, World War II and like, as like technocracy and sort of like skilled labor in college, which is now like more unpopular than ever. But it's funny, right? Because like you are somebody who I think is an artist and a very well-rounded artist and creative, but was it difficult, to not know exactly sort of what quote box to fit into? Like, am I going to make music? Am I going to sound? I want to do everything. I want to paint. I want to, make a collage. So you have like, so what was sort of guiding you? I guess like what was guiding you throughout all those years of like what the vision of your like life and your career was going to look like? Did you have one, or was it just like, I just know I just need to do something creative?
It was more the latter. I think music was something that was always my go-to.
Right.
So I grew up with a home studio in my house all the time because my dad had a home studio. So when he wasn't in there, I would go in there and go on his computer and go on Cubase and drop some beats on Cubase. So that was kind of always my comfort zone, always my go-to.
Right.
But I always messed around with graphic design, and I always kind of, my ideal setup is like I can turn around and like, depending on how I feel, I can paint, or I can do some graphic design, or I can, or I can make some music, and that would be great, right? If I just had like a 360 setup.
Well, I think we're there. I think that we're moving in that direction, though. It's like, I think, in some ways.
I see more and more artists definitely that are embracing that. Even people that started their career as actors that are embracing different art forms. And after all, the creative process, in each respective field is not so different from one another.
Well, it's true, and it's like I think even like something we talk about sometimes is like too. It's like it used to be the skill set was what you were selling, right? So it's like the specific skill set, but now, especially with AI, which we're going to talk about, it's like the skill set isn't everything anymore, right? So it's like you're selling sort of like a point of view, which you do. Your art is very, your visual art, I've never experienced your music, but your visual art has a very strong point of view and a very strong world you create. And so
that's good to know.
That's what, no, but like that is sort of what it is. It's like we're expanding past just having like these skill sets and as the social media era comes, it's like we have to have more of a cultural stamp or be more of like a build a bigger world in some ways, you know what I mean? And so yeah,
I think the art forms essentially speak to each other. You look at something like cinema. I think like someone like David Lynch had a really good idea of this, and he's been such a guide for so many, that it's something that encompasses pretty much all art forms, right? Like you have to know photography, you have to know how to have a good frame, and then you have acting, which is another art form, and the movie is pretty much nothing without the music, right? So it just kind of brings all these art forms together. I've worked in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and really what that industry is a conglomerate of all these amazing artists that are also, like, little parentheses, undervalued. I mean,
sure,
obviously we know there was a huge strike. When was it? Last year,
right?
But that's what it is. And I mean, to me, it's just obvious. It's obvious. It's ridiculous and obsolete at this point in time to have this idea that, like, I am just a musician, and this is what I do, and it's kind of obtuse. I mean, I get it. Specialization, I get it, because from a marketing standpoint, from like positioning yourself in a market, it makes sense because you attract certain people when you are specialized in something in particular. But that doesn't mean that you can't understand and be interested in other things, and that those things won't help your craft, won't help you make your specialization better also,
Exactly. No, I think it's a great point. And and so the next question I have, because because basically what it sounds like is you're in Miami, you're cooking, you're like, okay, I and then you're like, I just need to, this is good, but I want to do something more overtly artistic or creative. And I would argue, sorry, please, no.
No. Basically, any time. I think the chef that I was working for at the time said, "I get it, man." He said, this is what I do, but I know that you're good at many other things, and it's like if this is your notion, and you feel like you need to do something else anytime. And I remember this sentence: anytime that you're spending chopping an onion, it's just a waste of time.
Yo, for real. And you had a baby girl on the way at the time. I believe that I don't think Martina was. I think she was pregnant at that time, wasn't she?
It's funny because we decided, we were dead set, and we said, okay, we thought that to kickstart a creative career, Miami wasn't the optimal place, and we decided to move to Los Angeles.
Right.
And then a few months after, we found out she was pregnant. But we stuck to our guns, and he said, let's still move to LA. We're kind of crazy. Let's do it though.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I'm glad we did. So we ended up moving to LA, and then shortly after, I mean, not even a month into that, COVID came along. And so everything shut down. Everything shut down. And then I was still kind of freelancing, making graphics, and then I was making graphics for myself and just kind of putting them out. And then I was doing like this collage art and this thing called Space Tomato. And I was just putting out art. Yeah. And that was fun. And I had like little opportunities arise from that here and there. And then just by word of mouth, kind of was doing graphic design as a freelancer. And all my chef friends who thought I was crazy got laid off. And then at that point, I was like the only one really kind of making a little bit of money on the side. And then, I had a friend in Los Angeles, which, in LA is if you throw a rock, you hit someone in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a friend who had like during COVID, we would safely hang out a couple of times, and even before COVID. And he saw my portfolio, which in retrospect was horrendous. But as soon as production opened back up, because somehow it was like an essential thing.
Right.
He called me up and said, "Hey, I need someone for set dressing. Can you think you want to do this? This is you're like a Swiss Army knife, man. You want to come work with me?" And so I got hired on the production team with Nickelodeon. So started doing sets for Nickelodeon and graphic design for a show, and that really was huge for
sustainability and for a paycheck, I'm sure.
Absolutely, but also just to keep adding to the repertoire,
exactly,
of skills. And then as soon as that contract was over, he said, "Look, I'm taking you over to the studio where everything gets printed, all the props and everything that you've been designing." And and I think they're looking for someone like a graphic designer. And so I remember he took me over there and introduced us. So as soon as the contract ended with Nickelodeon, I hopped on and started working with the studio, and just kind of sharpen my skills there, as because I never went to school for it, right? So it kind of helped me to be in that environment, and that was also very it was like a multidisciplinary environment. It was a place where there was graphic design, and there were people doing things by hand, and there were people painting backdrops, huge backdrops, by hand. And so I really felt at home in that place, you know?
And so my question, because now, this kind of relates, and I do want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about this because now Inward Studio, I believe it's called, right? Which is your,
correct.
so would you say like all of these sort of diverse experiences you're getting, like working at Nickelodeon, sort of set dressing, like, but also like doing visual art in different ways, like, is this sort of like, is this inspiring you to go like, oh, like I want to have, well, first off, what is Inward Studio? Like what is it exactly?
Inward Studio is an agency. It's a branding agency. It's a
Right.
strategic brand transformation agency. We can take a seed and make it, just an idea of
Right.
a business idea and make it into an actual brand.
Right.
We can take an existing brand and totally transform it. We believe that at the core of every business, of every business idea or anything, there's a brand that we can bring out.
Right.
Yeah. So we're focused on brand positioning, strategy, design, and user experience.
Right.
So everything is very user focused, user friendly, and well thought out.
And it sounds like their time at Nickelodeon sort of like, and even, getting that different, I mean, everything leading up, but even working in restaurants, it's like for many years too, it's like, it's you have to build a world around it, right? It's like you have to build a world around a brand. And it's because a brand is not just a logo or graphic design. I mean, that's a huge part of it.
It's the storytelling.
Exactly. And I want to talk more about that in a bit later, but I do have a question. In the past 20 years as a visual artist, I mean, an artist in many respects, but you're great. That's how primarily I know you. You're a painter, you make collage art, you do graphic design, but what's changed in the past 20 years? What is changed for like the traditional visual artist, would you say, like in the past 20 years or so?
For the visual artist?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, definitely AI came along just the past few years and swept through with huge changes. And I can't think of anything as drastic that has changed aside from the way that you can expose your art to the world, because with social media in the past 20 years, that's what happened is you can have your art in front of millions and millions of people, without even spending a dime, right? Or without having any relationship with any art gallerist or anything, right?
Right, exactly.
So the game has totally changed from that sense. And then AI is like another.
Yeah. Well, the AI is just crazy. And, this kind of gets to the point of, why initially I was like, oh, I thought about reaching out to you, because I'm just going to read what you wrote here, because and then I have some questions. You wrote this on LinkedIn. You wrote, AI won't replace you unless you let it. Right now, we're at a weird stage where many businesses think they can just swap out a human with an AI and get the same results. But here's the reality. There's no better director for AI than an expert in their craft. A copywriter can guide AI to write better than someone who isn't a writer. A designer can direct AI to create better than someone who isn't a designer. The people who thrive aren't the ones fighting AI. They're the ones using it as a tool, right? So, this is and then I'm just going to sit back because this is good too. This is the moment to grab the reins, to use AI strategically, to lead or not follow. Creatives who master AI won't lose their jobs. They'll own the future of their industries. And it really spoke to me because we've been talking, I want to dissect it, but I especially, we mainly focus on performing artists, right? But visual art, it's a whole different ball game. You argue basically in this, and by the way, I agree with you. So I was going to say that at the top. You argue that AI is not a threat to artists, but a tool, just like a brush, a paintbrush in the hands of someone who's not a skilled painter. It doesn't matter basically, how good the brush is if you don't know how to paint, or you don't know composition, or you don't know whatever. It's not going to yield the same results as someone who has the skill to wield that effectively. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, and I think maybe eventually it will.
Right.
But I'm just an optimist. I think many creatives fear that AI is replacing them. And in some cases it is, I mean, it's kind of the nature of not having your own business and not being in control of that aspect of things. It's like you're part of a department, and then the CEO decides that he wants to cut the budget on the copywriter department, and then there go 10 copywriters, and maybe that department will never have 10 copywriters anymore, but they might have 2, and those 2 copywriters should be people that who can direct AI. So right now we're at a weird stage where maybe the CEO thinks that they can just replace the whole department with ChatGPT, but who the fuck is going to run that?
Right,
like
exactly.
Who's going to direct that? Is he going to do it? Because he doesn't have the time to do it. Is the marketing director going to do it? Because he doesn't have the time to do it. He or she doesn't have the time to do it. So
right.
Who better to do it? So historically, new tools have always changed the creative process, like graphic design before and after Adobe, right?
Right, exactly.
AI is just another tool, and how we use it determines its impact.
Right. So I think it's a really good point, because it's like the people, and I want to actually break down something you said, which is like when you said like, well, if you don't have a business, basically, if you're just a cog in the machine, right? If you are sort of doing this like, special or employee model of like, you're an artist who is employed by someone else.
Yeah.
You first off, that's always job insecurity in a lot of ways, because so much of the time we're constantly losing our jobs or whatever. But it's like, break that down for me a bit more, right? So it's like if you run a business, as an artist, you're safer. Like, what would you specifically as applies to?
I wouldn't say it's safer. I think you always have to be dynamic and readjust to what's going on in the world. You can't close yourself in these 4 walls and say, I'm an agency and this is the way that we do things. And like meanwhile, the world around you is evolving. You have to stay current with you have to know what's going on. I can't afford to hire 10 copywriters. I would love to, I love people, but that can't go on. At the same time, I know that me, as small as my business may be, I don't have time to do everything that a copywriter does. So I probably need someone to direct that. So I wouldn't say that like owning a business as an artist is safe. You're always, I don't know who is it that said it, that you're always kind of like chewing on glass as an entrepreneur, no matter what.
Right.
But you never know. You're always a deal away from everything failing. Like you have to be dynamic
that's
either
a
way.
But
also as an employee, if you're employed, you should always consider your, let's call it personal branding, even though it's like really a buzzword.
Yeah.
But you have to consider how you position yourself as a professional either way. So I would suggest to always, at least my MO is always to evolve myself in my positioning, so I want to position myself as an expert in a field. So I wouldn't want to be a junior graphic designer for 20 years, or working for the same company in the same position for 20 years. That's just not my jam. So my suggestion would be always try to evolve yourself, evolve your positioning. If AI is coming along, position yourself as the person who has the skills needed to direct it properly.
Well, and what's interesting, I've never heard this put this way before, but what's fascinating about this idea of, I've been very into this idea of like the one person business or whatever, which is basically like, it's like in the digital ecosystem, right? It's like, being a digital citizen means that whether you know it or not, like basically you are like a business. You're either a consumer or you're a business. You're either selling something or you're consuming something. That's kind of the 2 binaries of, and I think it's kind of like a binary
and everyone's always consuming.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I say this because it's like running a business means that, or considering, right? And because what does running a business even mean, right? It means using, basically being in charge of your own income stream. At the end of the day, like you are able to offer products, you're able to, diversify revenue streams, like, in a different way to because like you could technically, Inward Studio can launch a course, an e-learning course tomorrow, right? Or like they could, you guys. And so what's interesting is the flexibility and the adaptability you have, as a business owner, which didn't used to be that way, right? It used to be like, we sell Coca-Cola and that's what we do and that's all we do. But it's like, we can do variations on that. But, when you're building a personal business, which I would argue even Inward Studio is, you have more flexibility in terms of how you can make money, and would you say that's accurate? Or
yeah, I mean, it's something in this case, very much so. And it's no coincidence that I got into this specifically, because the idea of a creative agency was very appealing to me, seeing how, again, I would like to have a 360 room where I can turn around and edit some video and then turn around and do some music. So being able to direct all these aspects is amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
A creative agency is very fluid and flexible in that sense.
And so to go back to the AI, just how do you as an artist, as a business owner, I'm curious here too, but as an artist, how do you use AI?
So first of all, I kind of see it as like a personal assistant. I can just kind of spew out something really dirty, and not like sexual, but like something really dirty,
messy,
and
messy,
raw and messy and ugly, and it just kind of will structure it for me.
Right.
And it'll lead me in the right direction in that sense. So I use it to kind of, because I have a lot of ideas, and sometimes I just got to throw them down, and then some stick and some don't, but AI will let me.
Right. And you're specifically talking about like for your for the business side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects, So again, I use it like as a kind of personal assistant. I feel like I'm speaking to it all day.
Right.
I always, like, at any point given time, I could pull out my phone and like speak into ChatGPT and just kind of like, hey, structure this idea for me real quick.
Right. Exactly.
Also, obviously the AI, which is integrated into so many things, and it has been for so many years. I mean, AI is such a buzz thing now, but it's been around for quite a while, and it's been integrated in things for a while. So even things that Photoshop can do now are saving so much time. So but again, not everyone knows how to use Photoshop, and so if a graphic designer is using Photoshop, that's helping them out a great deal if they're utilizing AI correctly.
Right.
It's great for automation, like idea generation, efficiency, but obviously it doesn't have human intuition. It doesn't have emotional intelligence.
Right.
It doesn't have a deep understanding of brand identity, for example. And I don't know, like in the future, it might, in the future, it might get better. But if we don't stay not even ahead of the curve, but on the curve, then you'll get left behind. You'll get left in the dust.
Well, I want to frame this as I didn't expect it to go this way, but it's fascinating about, because like I'll use like, okay, as an actor, AI, in terms of my acting craft, like I use AI for research primarily, right? So I use it for research, or I'm like, that's primarily what I'm using it for, right? As a writer, I use AI frequently, because what I'll use AI for is like, I know what the scene is. I know, but it's like a second brain in the sense I'm like, I want to do this, and this in the script. And I want this to happen. Like, what do you think about that? Right. And it'll tell me what it thinks. It'll tell me about like flow. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So like I use it a lot for feedback. And then sometimes I will, oftentimes I will, after I write something, feed it in there, because I use it a lot for our business too. And it's like, but for creatively, I'll feed a script in there, and it'll give me changes. It'll rewrite some lines that I'm like, oh, like it's truly, but per your point, I know for a fact that it's like, I'm doing the heavy lifting, right? It's like, I'm still doing the heavy lifting when it comes to my artistic stuff. Like when you're using Photoshop, you're doing the heavy lifting. It just makes things, I don't have to be in writer's block for, like, but I'm really coming up with the ideas. I'm really doing, but I say this to go, what I didn't expect this to go is, because I was like, oh, it sounds like you use it a little bit in your artwork, but not a ton. It sounds like not a lot.
Not in artwork. I mean, are we talking about artwork or design?
Design. Let's
okay.
Design. Let's talk about artwork first.
Because with the artwork, it's no fun. I mean, if you're using AI for artwork, it's just not that fun.
No, yeah.
I mean, what's the point with artwork? I feel like, which is something that is like an expression, like a raw expression.
Yeah.
With artwork, I feel like when I put the last brushstroke on a painting, or the last note on a piece of music, there's this feeling that comes along of like, of like release. It's like I just released something out of me. With AI, there can't be that. I can't imagine. And you can direct it as much as you want to create or to build a world. And I see some AI artists, or of course there are going to be AR artists.
Well, it's a shallow dopamine. It's kind of a shallower dopamine hit, right? Because it's like if you're typing in like make me a painting of da da da, and it makes it, and it's really good. Like there is like a dopamine. There's like kind of just like everything else, right? It's like, but it's not a deep. It's not, per your point, a deep satisfaction.
I guess it depends on your dopamine levels and.
Well, yeah, no, but it's like when I'm like, oh, make this. I'm like, oh, it's cool that I type something in and it makes it, but it's not a. It's a shallow experiance.
Sure. Even if you can successfully build a world with AI, meaning that you can create a set of images that are in the same world, right? You can create 12 images that are all in the same world. What that tells me is that you are a person who is well-rounded and maybe understand art history and have enough cultural references in your database to direct AI to create that, because somebody just says like, make me Batman humping Willy Coyote. Like that's not, exactly. Like great. There are so many prompts and so many things you have to say to AI to get a precise,
version of what you want
product. Yeah. And the same with even with ChatGPT, like, I can spot right away when something's written with ChatGPT.
Yeah, me too.
So you have to also have the sensibility to say like, no, this still looks like it. This still looks and sounds like AI. I'm not using it as a tool. I'm just using it as as a patch. And so I see a lot of that. And again, I say we're in a weird phase because I see that obviously people are getting laid off, but what I see from big brands sometimes is you see like a caption on Instagram and you see like those line of emojis or like the M dashes, which nobody even uses. It's not even on your keyboard, the M dash, like nobody really uses those. So I can tell right away when something's done with AI. Obviously the images are getting better and better. Mid-Journey, the videos are getting better and better and more compelling, but still you can spot that it's AI.
100%.
And at some point, again, maybe you won't be able to. Maybe they'll get so good that you won't be able to, but still, you still have to have the cultural references to get a precise result.
That's a great point. It's a great point. And, one thing to just circle back about something you said in terms of AI, what I really find interesting is, AI helping you not, from a sense of it makes things in your life more convenient, makes running your business more convenient, makes dealing with like organizing your thoughts more convenient so that potentially you have more time to make art. This is something that I didn't even think about. It's like,
absolutely.
The more convenient your life is, and like, look, if we're in belief, which I am, like, I don't know what the equivalent is for an artist besides like I'm hired to be a graphic designer or whatever, or on the creative design team for like a big corporation. Like, I don't know what that, or I am getting, or I'm a resident artist somewhere like those kind of opportunities are few and far between. And so it's like, if building some sort of business is something we all need to do as artists, which I believe is true, then AI is going to make that easier for people. I'm not saying that it's going to be easier, but it's going to make it easier. You know what I mean?
If it's not building your own business, maybe it's just elevating your position. So say that you're a graphic designer and you really love doing graphic design. So you're like, I don't want to be a director, like I don't want to be a creative director. But why not? Maybe you could be a creative director, spend less time doing graphic design for the big wigs. And you, because you're more efficient and you're instead like you're an expert in graphic design, so you can direct the machines to do it, and you spend less time doing that, and then you have more time to do your personal graphic design, which is probably more rewarding than having to do fucking PowerPoint presentations, right?
Exactly. So, that's such a good point. Yeah, it's like it doesn't just, it makes that more convenient in some way. I am curious about this, there's a sense of urgency in your post where basically you're saying AI isn't as creative as we are. And we've kind of been saying it, but one day that could change, right?
It's very creative, actually. Yeah, it's creative. It's not, I think it does, it can, it can generate many design variations, but you got to make the final call. Like,
exactly.
there has to be a human making the final call.
And you think, do you think it's no? Yeah, and I guess that's my question. It's like, do you think basically the singularity or like sentience or whatever? It's like, do you fear? Like, do you think that there's a sense of urgency? It's like, get ahead, because what I liked about your post is you're basically like, learn now because we don't know how good this thing is going to get. We don't know, and so the people who know how to use it to, again, the word you've been constantly using, position themselves. You know, I'm going to use a really brief example, if I may, which is like, I'm making a series. You know, there was a series a couple years ago that I had a lot of traction on. You were pitching it to big people, and you know, like everything else in fucking Hollywood, it just like, you know, just didn't. You know, everybody drags their feet, whatever. Especially when it, you know, yeah, we love it, but they have a million projects to production. So I'm actually going to independently produce this project. I say this because this pilot episode is easily, you know, $1 million. It technically, but with AI, with things like, you know, because there's so much special effects, there's so much VFX, there's a lot of like even crowd scenes or things like that. AI drastically reduces the cost expenditure there if it's done, you know, if it's done in a way where, per your point, you can always tell, right? But it can drastically reduce cost expenditure. And I say this because, you know, people, you know, me as an actor, first off, expanding my identity to go, well, I just don't just get cast, and, you know, I do get cast in things, but that's not the only thing I do. That can't be the only thing I do. Is I have to be thinking about how I'm using things out in the world, developments out in the world to continue to expand my creative life and position myself creatively. And AI is really a key part of that for me in this, because I'm like, it's made writing faster for me. It's made, you know, getting through writer's block faster. It's also can potentially allow me to produce higher quality or increase production value. So it's like, is it about this fear of sentience even? You know, if you have a fear of sentience, does it, it's like, well, there's still, even if we're competing with an AI for a job, like as more top, as a business, right? It's like, as a quote, but you're competing with an AI agency, creative agency to an extent. Like, let's assume that AI can band together and make their own creative agency. Do you fear that? Or do you think, like, what's your thoughts about that? Besides it just being able to like replace sort of like the skilled labor on the way up, can it replace our sort of bigger creative visions in some ways? And we're competing against that?
At the end of the day, there will always be like a human directing some aspect. So, like AI creating its own creative agency run by robots. I mean, at that point, I think we're looking at a totally different world. I'm not afraid, particularly. Because personally, very selfishly and personally, I'm very dynamic. I think I will always find a way. And I think importantly, we have to stay on top of it, right? You can't let a whole generation go by and you haven't learned the current and important skills for the future, because this is the time to learn the skills for the future, right? So you have some graphic designers that went to school and learned graphic design by hand. And if they haven't learned Photoshop and Illustrator, I can't imagine how they're navigating the present times. So they let a whole generation grow up from being a baby into getting better and skilled with the digital age, and they got left behind. And now all they can do is point fingers and direct, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you don't even know the things that machines can do, how can you direct them? So it's, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, well, it does, because, and this is really hard to put because it's about so many different things. Basically, what I appreciate about what you're saying is, I think that you have your unique situation of being a well-rounded creative has positioned you in a way to have this flexibility, because so many artists, I went to a conservatory, an
Mm-hmm.
acting conservatory,
Mm-hmm.
where I learned violin, and all
Mm-hmm.
I did for 15 hours a day was do the violin, right? That's all I did. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's fascinating about what you're talking about is this idea of, again, it's like expansive identity. So it can't just be about, like, because a violinist could probably, AI would benefit a violinist's life in some way if they're not just if all they do is not just play violin, right? If they decide to see themselves as someone who's growing, who's producing their own music or social media content, playing it would help them in some ways, but they need to expand their identity to be more of just a general creative in some ways.
I
Like,
think I don't think they need to. I don't know if that's the case. Like maybe you just want to be a violinist and that's all you want to do. I would suggest that what you do is open your eyes to what's around you, because there's much more. And that's in any field. I think that if you're a doctor, you should still be open minded and
right.
consider what's around you, right? Because the world is evolving. All our notions are evolving. We learn new stuff all the time. So
And it makes your art
all those
better.
things help. I mean, I go back and look at the culinary arts now, and I'm like, oh fuck, man, that's like really an art form, and
Yeah.
like it really is, and like I see it like that more than ever now, even more so than when I was in it.
Right,
My
exactly.
my dishes reflect that. The work that I've done in design now reflects in the dishes that I make at home or for loved ones. You know,
Exactly.
so
Yes.
I think it's important to keep your eyes open and 360 all around you
But
in any
yeah,
field.
exactly, because it will ultimately make your art better, like you're saying, and then you'll be able to see things. You won't just see AI as a threat, right? You'll be able to see AI as an opportunity, because you're a little more, you're just a little bit more adaptable. You're a little bit more open,
To,
because you're not just married to my career looks like this very specific thing that I very specifically do. You can
exactly.
look at you can have a conversation with the reality and be
Hmm.
like, oh fuck, like, yeah, I can do something, like, oh, it's being loose
Hmm.
and flexible. You know what I mean, to an
Yeah, and
extent.
it doesn't mean that you have to like bury your head in AI either. I use AI to, like I said, to develop some ideas, but honestly, the seed for those ideas usually come during a walk in nature. You know,
Exactly,
and
exactly.
so that is still important to again look around and
I'm
consider the world around you.
Yeah, I want to talk about branding before we go, because this is
Mm-hmm.
something you do. I want to talk about sort of your personal brand, and I want to talk about, like, you know just your beliefs about branding. So you have Inward Studio, and
Mm-hmm.
do you well, first off, one thing I noticed about you, which I was kind of surprised, not because I think it's a bad thing, but like on LinkedIn, for instance, like you start like posting more like of this value add content, I would say, right, about sort of like creative careers, I would say, like even the post that I just read. You're sort of having this transition of being
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, this is what my belief is about X thing going on in our industry or going on
Mm-hmm.
in our world. What sort of cause was this, a recent sort of shift for you, this sort of like actively putting that kind of stuff out into the world? And what caused it? You know what I'm asking?
I think I look at myself a few years back, and it's hard to like be reflective enough to look back at certain times, but um, I didn't always know all the things that I know now, and not that I know everything. Like we're
No,
always
yeah.
evolving. That's it. I don't want to sound like that. I'm kind of speaking to my past self about some things. I mean, I'm just trying to add some perspective. I see that people are threatened by AI. I see the posts of people getting laid off and being replaced, quote unquote, replaced by AI. Um, yeah, in a sense, I'm trying to speak to a younger version of myself or a previous version of myself.
Right.
I
Right.
know that something that is obvious to me might really bring some value and totally shift the way that someone thinks. And so while I've done so so much in the past, I don't take for granted the perspectives that I have, and so I feel like I'll just share them, you know.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's kind of where it comes from. It just and also I have this feeling like I just need to get these things out.
Well, you know what's fascinating about this, because like, you know, it's like even social media, right? It's like, you know, artists are very suspicious in general. I would say all artists, because of the quote
Mm-hmm.
inauthenticity, or like
Mm-hmm.
the game of, but you know, we do have to show up as digital citizens now. You know, it's like, to me,
Sure.
it's not even about marketing anymore. It's just like there's a
Yeah.
whole other world, there's a whole other reality
Yeah.
that exists. And to be a citizen in that reality,
Yeah.
these are certain things that you do,
But
right?
I think if you don't have anything to say, don't force it. You know, like if
Sure.
again, like usually these posts or these things that I write, we can't really call them articles.
No,
These
no, yeah.
posts, they're things that come from some ideas that I have. Again, usually like during my morning walks or runs, or when I'm not doing something on the computer. Usually is when I have some ideas, and then I feel like maybe I can share this with the world, quote unquote, or with the digital space that I navigate.
So yeah. So
So,
I have a question about brand in general,
mhm.
which is, what do you see a brand as? In today's day and age, you know, whether it's for a restaurant, whether it's for a person, you know, an artist like such as yourself, or, you know, somebody who sells digital software, sort of, what is a brand?
Well, it's definitely more than just a logo, right?
Yeah.
It's how a business or a product is positioned. It's
Mm,
how it speaks to its users.
right.
Um, it's it's a story. It's a
Yeah.
story of that product or that service. It's what people say when you're not in the room. That's your
Yes.
brand, you know?
Yes, dude. It's the impact, you know, too. It's the feeling you leave behind, you know,
Absolutely.
and it's what people are saying about you. So I'm curious, like, you know, to build a brand in your eyes, sort of like, you know, especially, and I don't know if you agree with this, but it's like I view it as like this more expansive identity that we're talking about, showing up as a digital citizen, you know, being authentic. Yes, you know, authenticity is key, but how do, you know, when you're working with a company, or a, you know, a restaurant or whatever, or even an individual, you know, if you were
Hmm.
to do that, how would you start to sort of help them craft this brand as you see it? Like, what are the things you ask? What are the things you're curious about?
Well, I want to understand how they position. Again, it's about positioning. How you're positioning yourself in a particular space, and
Right.
I want to understand. You know, we could say many things. We could say what the competition is like, and who the end users are. You know, whether it's who buys your product, or whether it was who is listening to your podcast or whatever. But ultimately, it's I want to understand the core, the essence of what your authentic self is, whether we're talking about a business or whether we're talking about a person. I I want to extract the authenticity that is at the core.
Right. Right.
And I think that's where, you know, if you can hit that if you can place that well, how would you say you can get all the oil. No, I don't like the oil. Maybe
Get
that's a
all
bad
the oil.
example. That's maybe oil is not a good example.
Like,
But
if you can nail
it
it down, if you can identify it, if you
if
can
you can identify, then you have like a well of information that is endless. You know, if you can really pinpoint the authentic core of that entity, whether it's a person or whether it's a business, a product or a service, you know, and if you can nail that down, you will have so much to extract from there.
Well, do you mind me
So
asking
I,
what yours is? What you feel like you're? And by the way, let me just say this: what I appreciate about this conversation and what I feel like people are beginning to learn is this isn't paint by numbers. This is this is a very personal journey. It's like we do branding work with people, as performers, that takes 3 months. And it's like a very highly detailed process. And it's one way to do it, right? But the whole point of it is it's not just like fill out this survey and we'll be able to identify your, it is right. Sort of unspeakable. It's essence.
It is.
It's these and in
things. Fact, I'm going to give you an answer that is really unspeakable. I mean, ultimately it is what people say when I'm not in the room. And I think people will know what my brand is, me personally, better than I do. All I can do is try to show up as my authentic self as much as possible. And the more I do that, the stronger my brand will be. And the stronger and the more clear the thing that people will say when I'm not in the room.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is a good point. There is an intention, right? So, it's like, what I appreciate about what you're saying is like, I don't even know if I could write my brand down in a sentence. And by the way, you very successfully help people build brand, which I find fascinating. And I appreciate the honesty and the transparency, because it's not just like, it's, you have to feel it. You have to feel it with a person.
Because I think if you're trying to be something, then it's not authentic.
But let me ask you this, like, because when I feel like I've come into my own in a lot of ways as an artist, but there are certain, when I walk into a room, the problem with my light, not the problem is that I'm not always going to lead with that. I'm not always going to lead with the thing that makes me special. I'm a pretty wild person. I'm a pretty irreverent person, but I'm often very much the time, like, I'm a very intelligent person too. So sort of like, I know that what my light is, and the intention, I kind of like to fuck with people a little bit in a creative process, because I like to make them think I'll say the most insane, stupidest, crazy shit, or I'll do like, and I know that that's me.
Right.
I know that's me, but it's an intention, right? It doesn't feel like a game. It feels like an intention I walk into a room with. Like, is when you say leading with your authentic self, is there sort of like
there's such thing as feedback, right? I mean, what Eminem said it, like, I am whatever you say I am.
Yes.
So it's like, you also will get feedback from people that'll say like, that person dresses funky, and like they know they can. Then you finally, like, somebody says it to you, man, you dress really funky. And then you're like, yeah, I guess it's okay. People are accepting it. So like, you kind of embellish that a little bit, and I think that's just something that happens over time.
You lean into it, right? You lean into it.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it's like the things that, like,
and then you're more aware of it also.
Exactly. And you play on it, right? So it's like, it is, I guess, like, what I'm taking away from this conversation is two things. Is number one, to me, it's about, I agree, it's not about forcing anything, but it's about, I like to say, it's like, what about you is surprise? Like, one thing I will say about you, like, this is take this or leave this, and this is the same thing with your art too, is like, you are like old world looking dude in a lot of ways. Like, you're from Italy, you're like, it's like you have sort of like a very, I can't even describe it. It's like you feel like of the old world to me. And like, even your artwork, it's like, it's like even like the stuff the saints, but they're like robots and they're like, da-da-da. It's like, it's kind of combines to me like a very European, almost, old world sensibility in some ways.
Well,
with
I grew up in Rome, so I have
exactly, with like the futurism.
I grew up in Rome. I grew up in Rome, but sure. So I was exposed to all that old world art inevitably. It's all around you especially when you live in Rome, of all places. But also, like, by the time I was like a preteen, I was skateboarding, so really exposed to all a more modern kind of wave of art and street art and
exactly.
And then I think transitioning into the digital age and just kind of having all this treasure chest of stuff. Either you embrace it all and you kind of see how these things can speak to each other.
Exactly.
Or not. And I think the thing that comes more natural to me is doing that. It's just kind of being able to dig in and dig in that treasure chest and see how I can put these parts together,
Right.
So it just comes naturally. Honestly, it's I think it's just a matter of, again, having cultural references of blending them together, just the same way that we do with AI. Again, if we have to create an image with AI, the more the better, the more precisely you can create something. And
exactly. And it's like, the last thing I'll say about it is like, I think what's really interesting to think about here is too, is like what genuinely interests you. Like, it's like what genuinely interests you beyond just like, this is what I'm selling, or this is what I'm like, what interests you as a person, what ideas, themes, controversies, cultural, whatever. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, dude. We do end the episode with something we call comfort food performances. And so I'm going to describe what this is in a second, which is, and I'll give you an example so you know. But this has been a great chat, dude. And it's just, it makes me think, because you're an artist I really, really respect. I have some of your artwork. I have 2 paintings and a print of yours.
Yeah, and so thank you for being someone who bought my artwork in a very dark moment in my creative path.
Well, but I remember I walked into that room. You had like dozens of paintings, and I wanted all of them. I mean, I just really, really think your work is incredible too, and it's interesting because again, I think you're a true artist who is also an entrepreneur, which is, it feels like those 2 things are mutually exclusive, and you're good at business, right? So it's like, it feels like these 2 things can't be together. And I think that's disappearing, especially with people younger than us. I think they understand that it's all one fucking thing, right? But it's like, you're just a really good example of that. And
thank you.
Yeah. So a comfort food performance. So these are performances, and this could be a piece of art. This could be, a movie, a song. Something that you come back to. Go. But something that you come back to time and time again, right? So, just to give you a example here, I'm always kind of not great at choosing these, but I am going to give a piece of artwork, which I never do. I normally give a performance in a movie or like a something like that. But I'm going to give Saturn eating his son, the Goya one. That's like the most, what I'm talking about? It's that's the one where he's like,
yeah.
I love that painting. Goya in general, I just think is like, I love his work. But that painting specifically, which is probably like his most famous or whatever, I think is something I'm always like, I'll just randomly look it up sometimes. I'll look it up and be like, that's so fucking crazy. I'm just like, something about the extremity of it. Like, it's so fucking extreme. Like, I love things that feel extreme and just like, not even like it's because it's violent. It just feels like it's out of 10. It's just like, it feels like it's out of fucking 10. And like this wild-eyed dude is just like fucking, so like, I don't know, that registers with me. And it's probably something to do with like, it should probably just do with like a, whatever, an animal thing of like violence, or something. But it's like that painting is something, is probably for me like a quote, a comfort food performance. So it's, even though it's not a performance, but so what would be a comfort food thing for you? Like, when it comes to art.
There's so many. This is almost like saying,
you can list a couple.
Dish?
Yeah.
What's your favorite dish? But then I wouldn't know, because it depends. Like, what's your favorite color? Like, I never know what to answer because it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say like, I don't know, if I have to look at, I'll try to be more current, and I think I would go with Tame Impala, Inner Speaker. Like, I mean, it's something really comforting for me to listen to, and I can always go back to it and listen to it. It's always inspiring. I think Kevin Parker is an amazing artist. I think probably like my favorite band of in the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, dude.
Always putting out some good stuff. So I would say that's a good one. I could say more recent albums as well too, but I think Inner Speaker is a good one to start with if you haven't listened to it. That's something I would.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. All right, dude. Well, perfect, man. I mean, Thank you so much. I could talk to you for a while, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Also,
yeah, please.
One more thing, since we talked about food being an art, I would say carbonara.
Listen,
that's another comfort food.
Well, you know what my comfort food is my true comfort food is spaghetti a leche, as I call it, which you used to make for me.
That's right, with the breadcrumbs.
With the breadcrumbs and the anchovies and the red peppers. That's it. Listen. All right, dude. So I'm going to post the details about you, your socials, for Space Tomato, your personal, for Inward Studio. So I'll post all that in the description, dude. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.